Welcome to the American Medical Extended Reality Member Question and Answer Series. In this series, we'll be highlighting the incredibly diverse and talented AMXRA community, one interview at a time. Join me, Dr. Mark Zhang, founder and president of AMXRA, as we learn more about medical extended reality through the perspective of AMXRA members. Hello and welcome to the American Medical Extended Reality Association Member Q&A. This is our semi-regular recording and podcast where we interview some of the members of the American Medical Extended Reality Association, the premier medical society for medical extended reality. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Zhang, and I have the pleasure of interviewing today Dr. Richard Hart. Now, Rich, you have a pretty impressive background. I'd like to just kind of go over it quickly, and then we can kind of go on to our usual kind of conversation. But Dr. Hart has spent a lifetime in performance, from national champion in freestyle wrestling and representing Canada internationally to becoming an oncologic surgeon. Following general surgical residency and fellowship training in hepatic transplant and hepatobiliary pancreatic surgical oncology, he was recruited to St. Joseph's Health Centre, Toronto, to develop and build this specialized surgical program. Within 9 years, the service was awarded the HPB Centre of Excellence by Cancer Care Ontario, having become the third busiest program in the province with the lowest operative morbidity and mortality rates, all as a single surgeon. That's incredible. He's passionate about teaching the patients the principles and science associated with mastery and excellence, believing the DNA for developing elite performance is a constant regardless of the domain. For this reason, he has developed Next-Gen Surgery, the science of elite performance, an innovative, cutting-edge platform and scientifically based approach to mind-body training. It layers neural feedback, biofeedback, learned self-regulation, and advanced performance psychology to create the mind-body awareness essential in developing optimum performance and stress resiliency. This platform can be applied to any domain where peak performance under pressure matters. It's his vision to transform how physicians and surgeons, elite performers who populate the world of healthcare, are trained for the cognitive, emotional, and physical skills required to deliver optimum performance when it truly matters most, when human life is on the line. That is pretty impressive. You were a single surgeon and you were able to win a Center of Excellence by the Cancer Care Ontario, being the third business. So just I'm a palliative care physician, so I just don't know scope. What's a usual hepatobiliary program? How many typically like attendings or surgeons are there in a program?
Well, at least 4 or 5 generally. I mean, the big programs in Ontario have at least 4 or 5. You know, I was recruited here in Toronto, where there was no program. And it was just down the street, figuratively speaking, from the busiest hepatobiliary program in the country and one of the top 5 to top 10 in North America. And then, further north, still in the city, is another huge program. So it was a bit daunting. People said to me, "You're never going to be able to develop a program there." I foolishly or naively believed, given my lifetime of being in sport, that no challenge is too big, and tell me I can't do it, and we work twice as hard to try and prove you wrong. It wasn't easy, that's for sure. And while I was a single surgeon initially, we created a phenomenal team there. So, there were my anesthesia colleagues who took a huge interest in, helping to develop things the way I had asked them based on training, but then using obviously their own due diligence to figure out what was best for them, and then us coming together doing that. Training a large cohort of nurses to be able to perform optimally. And I must say, I was fortunate that I just had this phenomenal group of nurses who were willing to learn and really wanted to learn. And then, the floor nurses, everybody in the ICU, the surgical nutritionists. I mean, so while I was sort of the one getting the accolades and doing the surgery, none of it would have happened without everybody. Once we became known as a center of excellence, then there were things that were required, bringing on more surgeons and things like that. But that's how it started. And I hadn't done any of my training in Toronto, right? I trained in London, Ontario, at the University of Western Ontario for general surgery and transplantation. Then I went to the UK to Hammersmith Hospital for further HPB training. So then I came back. I was relatively unknown, so there was a lot of having to interact and meet people. And actually, I wanted to happen now, but you need to prove yourself over time.
Right.
And that basically came, fortunately, through results and having a community in Toronto who was willing to send me patients and see what I could do. So I have to, ultimately, I need to thank all of my colleagues in Toronto, because in the end, it was really quite generative. And it's sort of you don't want to work in a silo.
Of course.
So ultimately, we were all integrated.
It's a perfect example of this concept you talk about elite performance. Tell me more about this. What is elite performance to you, and how are you kind of using that? We are going to get to XR, because that is the purpose of this conversation.
Absolutely.
But tell me more about this concept of elite performance.
So, while I'm going to continually reference surgery and surgeons simply because that's my area of expertise, or where we would say I have domain expertise. Really, this is for all of healthcare and all of allied health professionals. So physicians, surgeons, nursing, huge, first responders, right? It's for everybody. So while I will be saying surgery and surgeons for the bigger, larger audience listening, please also hear physicians, nurses, OTPT, first responders, rather than my repeating it all the time. But really, my belief is that healthcare professionals are high-performance athletes, and training needs to reflect that concept. Sorry, and there are multiple requisites for elite performance, right? And they're all important in their own right, but one is slightly more important than the other. I'll explain why. So, the first is our technical skill, right? Yeah. And that comes through knowledge and skill training, ultimately leading to automaticity of this skill, right? That happens over years, right? That's through feedback, deliberate practice, intention, right? Ultimately leading through neuroplasticity to the brain assigning a set of neural resources to be able to use that technique regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
Then we have the human characteristics of self-efficacy, grit, willpower, commitment, and mindfulness, right? They all foster resiliency. And then finally, self-regulation. And this is what we're focusing, because self-regulation is really the harder requisite skill to develop, right? It's the awareness and control of the body, as well as cognition and emotion, right? To be able to learn to control or use your emotions to create a quiet mind to enhance your performance, okay? So really, it's then the ability to control your internal environment in the face of a constantly changing internal and external environment. That happens everywhere in healthcare, right? Interventional radiology, OR, obstetrics, emerge, trauma, ICU, CCU, everywhere. So it goes everywhere. And really, there's never been any training in that, right? All of the platforms or all of our training to date really focuses on skill acquisition and execution. And talking about surgery, again, ultimately leading to automaticity. Yeah. But the best skilled technician in the world will never be able to achieve mastery if they can't self-regulate in critical moments. And, looking just a little bit further, linking this to the economics, and it's hard to, as a surgeon from Canada, where we have socialized medicine,
Sure.
okay, looking at the economics of harm, the economics of preventable injury. I mean, those numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
And so what we're looking at and trying to do is look at the human factors associated with performance. And before I go on, my co-founder in this is Dr. Wilson. And I really need to acknowledge her. She's 81 now. She's a world authority in biofeedback and learned self-regulation and advanced performance psychology for sport. And she was one of the first to incorporate that into the world back in the 1970s for international athletes. And
Rich, that's how you actually got into this is, not only are you a heck of clearly you've had some accolades from your clinical kind of work, but before that, you were a world-class freestyle wrestler. That's pretty crazy to think about kind of that journey.
Thanks. I mean, I would like to say that I actually competed at the Olympics or the World Championships. I didn't. I was alternate for the Pan Am Games, and so while I had successes, absolutely. I didn't have all of the successes that I had hoped for as an athlete. But as I look back on it, I mean, I was fortunate. I mean, I started in sport when I was a young kid. And my father pushed me. My coaches pushed me. Ultimately, I started wrestling in grade 7, and I was fortunate to have great teams and great coaches and great teammates, but also great competitors and challengers who all elevated, I guess, my game, right? And really taught me what was necessary to develop elite performance, to be elite. I mean, I got to go to Japan for 6 weeks when I was 17, and it was really there that I saw, what it meant to be a world champion or world class, because I was fighting the junior world champion and senior world champion, and at times, in all honesty, I was getting beat up by them at 17. But it really taught me what world class meant, right? Yeah. So all of the successes and everything I had in sport, yes, I transferred to surgery, and it was there. You're right, in university that I met Dr. Wilson, right? And so for 4 years, where she was our mental performance coach, she was able to teach me the skills on how to control, as I said, or use your emotions for a quiet mind, integrate things normally outside of conscious awareness and bring them into conscious awareness, right? To be able to then focus on that. And, we do that obviously through brain-computer interfaces and things. It was that approach that I then took to surgery. So I approach surgery as a sport. Yeah. Surgery is a non-contact sport.
And high performance sport.
Right. But not everybody identifies with sport. Yeah. Right. So I'm going to say, elite performance in any domain, as you said in the introduction, because the DNA is the same, regardless if you're, a performing artist, a musician, a graphic artist, and, an athlete, anything, right? It all the same brainwave speeds. So I'm going to refer to everybody from now on. We're all cognitive athletes, right? From here up, we need everything the same as a Top Gun fighter pilot, an Olympic athlete, right? A performing artist, whatever, or a CEO of a company.
Yeah, yeah. So I got to ask, Rich, how does this all go back to extended reality?
Great question. So given that that's what we're talking about here, I've been talking about this concept of surgeons, physicians being high performance athletes, and training needs to reflect that concept since 2013. But in 2013, VR, AR, MR, the umbrella of XR, it wasn't really prevalent. So there was no way to be able to scale this in any way to be able to bring it to everybody. Yeah. In 2017, I saw the HoloLens. Yeah. And that's where all of a sudden I went, okay, this is how we can bring this to the world of healthcare. So training in surgery medicine was already changing, right?
Yeah.
We were going from an apprenticeship-based model to a competency-based model, which created significant problems in that, less time in the operating room for the hands-on ability to learn the technique, but also for mindset mastery. And all of a sudden, these phenomenal VR platforms were coming out for training the skills, the technical skills of surgery. And I thought, oh, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I want to add in the self-regulation aspect of it. So, I started, looking at HoloLens and saw what they were doing at Case Western back at the time in anatomy, and just found that to be fantastic. So was going to actually create our own VR content, and then thought, wait a minute, there's these companies out there that are doing a phenomenal job. They're so much further along in that. Why recreate the wheel? Let's take this very specific aspect of performance and try to work or collaborate with everyone to elevate all of the programs. And, over the years, we see these programs have now become extremely robust, right? Showing that, surgical technique improves or performance improves by 240%. And then you add in the, not just with immersive VR, but interactive VR with haptic feedback, which I believe is critical to all of these platforms. And now we have a system that we can actually train you to pre-experience anything that you're going to experience in the operating room. But there's no way to then add on the cognitive and emotional aspect. So by being able to then train that in the virtual world with haptic feedback, we can then provide the transfer skills into the real performance world. That's how I came to it. We were unfortunate with the pandemic in that sort of halted us. But if we want to look at the positive aspect of the pandemic, it accelerated the implementation of and adoption of digital health strategies and really these virtual programs by probably 3 to 5 years, which is extremely exciting because now they're being recognized that this is the way forward. This is what we need to do for all of medicine and surgery. So that's and studies have shown that through the pandemic, unfortunately, people were being put into these high acuity situations that they weren't prepared for, and that outcomes were worse. So now these platforms are great because they act as take-home trainers, so that you can practice daily in any environment and with feedback.
And it sounds like when you were first kind of exposed to this concept of elite performance when you were in university, that type of work with Dr. Wilson was like pretty involved, right? You had to go to like a distinct clinic and it involved like lots of big machines and doing biofeedback and things like that. And what I'm hearing is that the value of like these kind of XR tools is that you can actually, it's a perfect example of how a digital twin or digital workflow can kind of democratize or create something that you otherwise had to go to like a very specific kind of place to get. And now it can be democratized for everyone. That's what it sounds like to me.
Absolutely.
Really cool. And so how did you find out about the American Medical Extended Reality Association?
So by chance, by fortuitous chance. So, with the pandemic having shut down what I was doing, I really took that as I took that hard because I was putting so much effort into that. But over the last year, my passion for this program, kind of the fire was within me. And I said, I really want to know if I have a real cool science project, or if I actually have something that the world of healthcare would want for training. And I committed to go to VMED in LA. I did that sort of late last year, and the very first morning of VMED, while I was waiting to speak to someone, they said, "Oh, you probably want to speak to Mark." And we became introduced. You told me about the AMXRA. I joined immediately because of, oh, sorry. You okay?
It's elite performance. That was a good catch.
Thanks. Mongoose-like reflexes.
That's really good. Yeah. No. So you were saying that you we got introduced at VMED and you joined. Thank you for joining.
I'm glad that this was available, because I think it's, it's the future. I mean, I'm grateful to have joined, but also to see, the people who are on this, on the platform, on the board, and their expansive knowledge in so many different areas. I mean, I come at it from the lens of surgery. There's gaming people on there. There's entrepreneurs, innovators. We look at some of the people that you've already interviewed in this, who have phenomenal platforms. That I went into one of the House Call VR events. Fantastic, right? And there's so many people who are on here that it's really a way, or I see it as a way, to be able to rapidly advance what I'm trying to do here in Toronto with people across the globe who have a similar interest, and who can go, I think that's really cool. I think training the human factors is really important. Let's look at how we can collaborate together to be able to make this happen. Because historically in medicine and surgery, I found we do work in silos. I mean, even within a healthcare institution, we don't often communicate with the other people in our division. We're so busy doing our own thing. This allows us the opportunity to have, right now it's only, it's a small number of people still, right? We're under 300. We just hit, right? We hit the 250, I know, was hit. So, it's still relatively small, with obviously people who believe in this wholeheartedly. So, it's a real, I mean, I don't want to say target rich environment, but it is like all of a sudden a group of people brought together in a small area. So I think it's absolutely phenomenal what you're doing, what you've done, and what your plan is for the future.
Well, thanks, Rich. I mean, and part of what we're trying to do with AMXRA, as you said, is break down silos. So one of the ways we're doing it is with these member Q&As. So you have the floor, Rich. If for the current members, for prospective members, this does get posted into the internet on YouTube. What do you want people to know about kind of next gen surgery? That's the name of your initiative at your company, Next Gen Surgery, focusing on this concept of elite performance.
The science of elite performance. That's right.
Yeah. So tell me, what are the things that you are looking for, or would like this kind of community to know? Are there things that we could be helpful for? What are you looking for? How can we help?
I think the biggest thing is creating awareness about the importance of training the human factors. Because, I think the biggest barrier that I've found for talking about this is, and I'm a surgeon, so I can say it, ego and tradition. Right? We've never trained this, right? Historically, stress resiliency and stress mitigation has been left to what Osler termed the equanimity of surgery. That over time, one acquires these skills. Okay, but we know that stress in the operating room is common, 5.87 times per case, and that stress impacts performance, both technical and non-technical. And I think as a broader community, we need to address the fact that we unfortunately cause preventable harm because of lapses. And that's hard to accept, given that we've done things for so long. So I think one of the important things is to help get the word out that training in human factors is sort of the next layer down on a systems level to enhance patient care.
Rich, I really think you're onto something here. I really I'm a palliative care doctor. I'm also an osteopathic physician, and we think about like, one of the but at a high level, we think about kind of whole body care, and just kind of thinking about that whole perspective. And in palliative, we kind of focus on acute symptomatic care of patients with serious illness. But then another big piece of what we do and specialize in is hospice care, or care for patients at the end of life. And I always kind of describe like the serious illness symptom management and the palliative care and hospice as being kind of like the biceps and the triceps, right? They're both like, they're part of the same kind of unit. They move the arm, but they're different muscle groups, and you need to have both, and you need to work both. I think ideally to be fluid in that arm movement. And what you're hitting on, I think, is this idea where I think a lot of the low hanging. I'm not saying that this is easy. I think there's it's not, and there's so many incredible companies out there doing this work, but creating, particularly for surgical and procedural fields, these incredible solutions that enable learners and clinicians to go through and simulate in pretty high fidelity procedures and things like that. But there's this other piece, the triceps, which is what you're kind of focusing on, which I think is like a kind of an untapped area, which is everything else, right? Like how do you kind of calm the mind? How do you handle stressful scenarios? How do you kind of refine your movements intentionally? I think there's something there that's really, really interesting. And I really hope that you continue to move forward with this, because there's definitely something there, and I think there's a translation. Of course, my sense is surgical fields is a great place to start, but to your point, I think this elite performance kind of thing has legs. I mean, I think it could go to so many other specialties in medicine. And to your point, it doesn't have to be medicine specific. It could be for anything. It's great. I'm fascinated to. I'm so glad you're able to have. We were able to talk like this, because this is the thing that you're trying to approach, Rich, is like what makes me so excited about the field of medical extended reality. I always tend to think about like the kind of use cases in MXR right now in like 4 big buckets, and like, in the order of like most kind of mature and obvious to like, more kind of out there and like kind of still evolving. And like the mature and obvious are like simulation, education, things like that. Lots of people are doing it. Like there's a lot of value. It's getting pretty mature. You can kind of pick a solution and just go if you really need to do the thing. Then there's like the clinical use cases, whether they're diagnostic, therapeutic, physician or clinician assisted or patient facing. That's a burgeoning field, many point solutions, more and more evidence for each solution. That's going to continue to grow. Then to me, they're like those administrative / like non-MXR use cases that we're all going to end up using, because XR is just going to be like the next like the next kind of platform for compute. So, the concept of infinite kind of windows in your virtual workplace, or having these social interactions inside of kind of inside of a metaverse or in your real world that feel better than just like 2 guys in a screen with boxes. But what you're doing is what I think is the most exciting thing, which is this 4th box, which is all the things that like you never would even think about as being like a use case for XR, but kind of you need XR to truly leverage, right? I call it like the AMXRA box, and it's those things like this elite performance which otherwise would be kind of only available to literally like elite athletes, right? Because it's like a piece of
it's
that
a niche market.
Yeah, like and you have to go to like a physical thing. It's not scalable at all. And now with like these immersive tools, you can actually create like at least a portion of that could be scaled. That's exciting.
Absolutely.
That's super.
And the development of mobile responsive technology,
Yeah.
right? The ability to take these large systems and, create sensors that you can wear, EEG sensors that are dry electrodes that you're not having to put on paste, where you can do surface muscle tension with biofeedback through wireless devices, hand temperature or electrodermal sweat response, because those are all inputs of emotionality. So yeah, and it's through the ability with XR to be able to do this. I mean, we're hoping, that we're going to develop a purpose-built device that's going to incorporate what we need to be able to train exactly what we need. Yeah. And, while we're talking about elite performance, that's great. That's my overarching passion, right? Given the sport to healthcare surgical comparison.
Yeah.
When I look at it briefly, I think it's, to put it in perspective, it's best linked or likened to sort of self-paced events. Yeah. Right, where natural breaks in performance are akin to the breaks between your surgical maneuvers, and that's when you're susceptible to how you're thinking and how you're feeling and how that affects you. But you're a palliative care physician. I see this, being used in prehabilitation for patients coming to surgery or coming to care, to help them to be able to calm that mind. That once someone's given the diagnosis of cancer, their ability to make decisions is gone. Their ability to have attentional focus, to be able to stay calm, right? You can train those, similarly. I think it was, the pandemic really highlighted the issues of burnout, right? Flame out, burnout, and mental health concerns throughout the healthcare profession, right? Prior to the pandemic, that was costing healthcare systems in the US $17 billion annually. Yeah. Right. So there's multiple arms to this. And as you say, with the ability to have these, XR platforms to be able to deploy it to everybody, all of a sudden we have a tool that can really be used for good. Whereas, as you say before, you have to go to specialized centers. Right. It's costly, time consuming, and all of that. So, I like that you put it in the AMXRA box. I'd like to bring the human factors over into the education, training, clinical.
and just to be clear, Rich, it's not a judgment. It's more just, for Absolutely. Me personally, I would have never thought of using this, using the technology to do this. And that's what's so exciting, are these use cases that are just not obvious to me, or not just me in general, but I think they're not first order. We're all, we've probably taken a lot of multiple choice question tests throughout our career. They're not like first or second order questions, right? They're like third order. Those are the tricky and interesting ones that I usually just pick C and move on with.
Yeah. It's sort of having the ability to say, well, I was fortunate, right? Because having the background I had in sport, and then all of my experiences in surgery, I could look and see, here's where deficits are occurring. Here's where there's an actual use that could really be impactful, right? Studies show 40% of surgical residents have seen a significant complication due to a primary surgeon's inability to handle the stress.
Interesting.
And yet, and as I said, stressors are incredibly common. It's individualized how we deal with it, and very few people have actually had any assessment or training and strategies to be able to best cope with that. So, I look at that. Overarching, it's a lofty goal, but that, I think, is low-hanging fruit as our education models are changing, and that VR and AR is all of a sudden being accepted. It's like, let's add this on. Let's be generative, right, and improve everybody's ability to perform, right? Because all the brainwave speeds have cognitive and emotional process that can be trained.
I think it makes a ton of sense to me. Using biofeedback to emotionally regulate and just be aware has immense benefits, particularly in high stress scenarios, right? So, medicine during a code or a rapid response, surgery during a complicated, or just any surgical procedure, but certainly during like tricky part or a complication. I mean, there's so many scenarios where having those tools, we all probably just kind of fall on our crutches, but very few, I suspect, have had any training, and that's kind of what it seems like that's what you're going to be building towards, which is incredibly exciting. It got me thinking. It's almost like when we think of like the true masters, it's like those monks in Asia who can control their temperature. Is that what eventually cardiothoracic and hepatobiliary surgeons are going to be able to do using this program? Is
Absolutely.
Control
Absolutely.
their.
I mean that's through autogenic exercises, right? Through visualization, we're able to. I mean, I don't want to talk about me per se, but I've done a lot of this, so I can raise the temperature in my hand by several degrees through visualization, right, of the arterioles opening up, so you can regulate like that. I mean, progressive muscle relaxation, autogenics, visualization. If we look at visualization as an advanced sport performance tool.
Yeah.
So when I went to surgery, I effectively swapped out the visualization that I did every night for my skill, for the surgical skill.
Yeah.
And I broke that down into minute detail, right? Just this is how you cock your wrist to put a needle into the tissue.
Yeah.
This is how you pronate. This is how you supinate, right? In and out, pronating, supinating, and working, kinesthetically, not just visually, but kinesthetic for motor skill acquisition. And when you get really good at visualization, and we can measure your ability to visualize on EEG. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you put the EEG on, okay, and you put an EMG on, I can show you videos that we have where the body can't tell the difference between you physically doing something or you visualizing yourself doing something. And you can see fasciculations in the downstream muscles. Well, that's going to strengthen that neural network. It's going to improve the speed and consistency of learning. That's where deliberate practice and intention come into play. So it's really teaching these principles that we use in sport all the time to surgery. And, we know that to create a habit, it takes about 66 days. This whole notion of 3 weeks is not right. That came from a book in the 60s by Maxwell Marx, who was a plastic surgeon, and a psychocybernetics. And he found that his patients noticed change in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
After surgery. Well, I mean, that's just the healing process, really. So, but that's where the 3 weeks came from. And there was only one study that I've ever found that's been done on creating a new skill, behavior, or habit that actually looked at it. It came out of University College London, 2009 or 2010, and they found that it was approximately 66 days. Now, obviously, there's variance within that, right? But that just talks about the need for daily training to be able to create a new neural network through neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight.
It's so fascinating. I've had especially doing this XR stuff, I've actually had the pleasure of talking with a few, I would say, elite athletes or former elite athletes. And it's really kind of highlighted, and I know we've talked about this before, Rich, but this concept that I've never really thought about before of like, I always think about genius as being kind of like mental genius. But, you're not the first person who's had a background in kind of high performance sport I've talked to who's kind of talked about this concept of like, visualization and like really being like truly attuned to like the motions and the intention and that like deep mind body connection. And it makes me think of like the idea of like a physical genius, right? Like the concept of an economy of movement plus like intention that I don't think many people, I certainly personally do not think I have it all. And that is something that I suspect like any type of habit or thing, grows with intentional work, which is really really interesting. You know, I'm getting a little older, but it's so great to like know to learn new things, like truly new things every day. So really really good stuff. Rich, I am aware of the time, but
Yep.
I want to end with one question. You know, it's great that you are a part of the a founding member of AMXRA. We met at VMED, and you know, I always end these Q&As with a question about what do you see, what most excites you about the field of medical extended reality, and also AMXRA.
So, I mean, I think there's several things. With respect to the AMXRA, I mean, I see this body as becoming, it is already, but as it grows, the preeminent society for extended reality training. And again, I will say I'm thankful and grateful, as I'm sure everybody who's already a member is, for all of your efforts. What I see, I mean, I'm excited about the journal that I know is going to be coming to hopefully be able to contribute to that and extend, you know, the knowledge to disseminate knowledge to a wider group of people who aren't necessarily associated with it right now. I mean, I look forward to ultimately, I believe, having our own conferences where we're presenting not what's happening now, but the future. You know, what's possible. I mean, and I think we certainly saw some of that at VMED.
Yeah.
And we will again next year. And I know there are other you know, other meetings and stuff. I just haven't been to them yet. So to anyone whose meeting I've not mentioned, I'm sorry. I'm sure I will in the future. So, and in terms of what do I see as the future of XR overall, I mean, I think it's going to create lifelong learning as a model of where we can be, because, you know, your ability to perform in any environment, to be able to help people in any environment, is, there's no ceiling to it. So it's just going to grow and grow, and new things are going to come to the fore that we haven't even thought of at all. I mean, I'm going to be doing this looking at human factors, and I suspect what's going to come out of it is case uses that I would have never even imagined by speaking to people in the States, in Asia, in Europe, right? Australia, like all around the world, South America, who are going to say, what about this? And what about that? So that's where I see XR going. Because like you said, I'm not the first person who's talked about visualization. I'm certainly not the first person who's talked about human factors by any stretch of the imagination either. I mean, I'm grateful that I have been able to put these two things together to come up with something. I mean, look, everyone's talking about flow now, right? You know, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, when he first talked about it, I don't want to get into too big of a discussion on flow, because I think there are different camps on what flow really is. But, you know, really, it's when your clinical skill or your ability to perform and the challenge are like this. So people talking about getting into flow states, I think it's unrealistic, because to actually get into true flow is hard. But by doing this type of training, maybe we can get our technical skills and the challenge and our ability to then handle them to this level that we can access states similar to that, to be able to understand those mind-body states, to be able to then, I call it a pre-performance state, right? And then you need to perform regardless of how you feel in that pre-performance state. But you know, through these types of interactions and through XR and all of that, hopefully we'll be able to, you know, perhaps tap into really identifying on a neurologic and physiologic level how to actually access that. But that's really suggests it's under subconscious control. Really, to perform, you need to have conscious awareness of these things that are normally within our subconscious thought. Yeah, I may get a whole bunch of messages now from the flow community saying blasphemous, but
hey, you know,
at least it's a conversation.
I think it's exciting, right? Number one, Rich, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I think we have a lot to learn, and I'll be excited to see kind of where you go with this, and hope to see contributions in our journal, which we're going to be publicly announcing soon. Probably by the time this is out, actually. It's no. It is like not a. It's like the worst kept secret.
It's an open
We are releasing a journal. It's the Journal of Medical Extended Reality, JMXR, and it's going to be a heck of a thing. Open access, peer reviewed. We intend for the journal to be the journal of record for medical extended reality, and we're excited to be able to do it. And I personally am excited to see and hopefully learn more about kind of the work that you do, perhaps in the journal at some future state. But otherwise, Rich, just to close this out, where can people outside of the AMXRA feed, where can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more or contact you?
So thanks for that. I mean, I think the easiest way is through LinkedIn right now. Yeah. I mean, we're building a web page. It's sort of under construction. My email address is the easiest one would probably rshart@richardhartmd.ca. But LinkedIn is probably the easiest. And as I've transitioned sort of from surgical practice to trying to be a surgical entrepreneur, I have quite a bit of time because we're an early startup. So I'm open to speaking to anyone anytime. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And then obviously just through messaging on the AMXRA board. It looks like I'm logged in all the time. I just don't ever log out. So I see messages as they come in, and I'd be happy to speak to anyone who wants to comment on what I've said, be it positively or negatively. I mean, I don't know everything. I'm here to learn as well. I have the experiences that I have, but others are going to come with their own experience to be able to say, have you thought about this? Have you looked at that? I mean, and I may say, yes, I've looked at that. Here's why I think it's great. Here, and we can have a collaborative discussion, and who knows what can come from that. So thank you again for having me, for giving me this platform to be able to talk about what we're trying to do. Right?
It's a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll hear more with time. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Richard Hart, and we'll see you on the platform. Bye, everyone.
Absolutely.
See you. This has been a production of the American Medical Extended Reality Association. Our mission is to advance the science and practice of medical extended reality through advancing care delivery, scientific investigation, innovation, education, advocacy, and community. If you are interested in learning more or joining AMXRA, please go to www.amxra.org to learn more. Bye now.